Okay, so I'm just I did have my welcome to Aunty Andrea's reading corner and Andrea Pandrea. This is part 2 of tonight's episode. I just realized I saw people coming on, but for some reason I couldn't see who they were. Their names weren't coming up, so I went to check and make sure I was online. I am online, so I don't know. Maybe they've just got it set up so that I can't see. But I'm just going to continue from here. Sorry about that little intermission. I hope you went to the lobby to get yourself a drink. Curtis, hi, honey. How you doing? All right, here we go. I'm going to continue. Hi, Sky. Sky, my beautiful cousin from Australia. Hello, darling. I know you were setting your timer for this one, so I'm happy to see you. All right, so just to catch you up, because I had one person kind of watching on the side. This is my second attempt at doing the video. Anyways, I couldn't tell who anybody was. The names weren't coming up, so I thought I was offline. Anyway, I'm online. I don't know. Clearly, I'm not as technologically advanced as some may assume. So anyway, let's... You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back to the beginning, and I'm just going to start, because I'm only like 2 pages in, okay? So here we go, chapter 21. That week, my mother went crazy cleaning the house, while I waited for something to happen. I thought it would be a telegram saying they weren't able to come after all. I was sure God only wanted to punish me for a little while, not for the whole spring vacation. Cheer up, Margaret, my mother said over dinner. Things are never as bad as they seem. How can you be glad they're coming, I said. After all those stories you've told me about them, how? I want to show them how well I've managed for 14 years without their help, and I want them to see my wonderful family. My father said, you can't expect Margaret to be overjoyed when her plans have been changed to the last minute. Look, Herb, my mother said, I haven't forgiven my parents. You know that. I never will. But they're coming. I can't say no. Try to understand. Both of you, please. My mother had never asked me to do that before. Usually it was me asking her to try and understand. My father kissed her on the cheek as she cleared away the dishes. He promised to make the best of it. I promised to. My mother kissed us both and said she had the best family in the world. On April 5th, my mother and I drove to Newark Airport to meet them. My father didn't come. He thought it'd be better if he stayed at home and greeted them there. All the way to the airport, my mother briefed me. Margaret, I'm not going to try to make excuses for my mother and my father, but I want you to know that your grandparents have their beliefs too. And 14 years ago, well, they did what they thought was right, even though we know it was cruel. Their beliefs were that important to them. Am I making any sense to you? Some, I said. When they announced the arrival of flight number 894 from Toledo, I followed my mother to the gate. I knew it was them right away. I knew it by the way they walked down the airplane stairs, clutching each other. And when they got closer, I knew it by my grandmother's shoes, black with laces and fat heels. Old lady shoes. My grandfather had white hair around the edges and none on top. He was shorter and fatter than my grandmother. They looked around a bit before my mother called out, Here we are, over here. They walked toward us, growing more excited as they recognized my mother. She gave each of them a short hug. I just stood there feeling dumb until my grandmother said, And this must be Margaret Ann. When she said it, I noticed the cross around her neck. It was the biggest one I'd ever seen, and it sparkled. I didn't want them to touch me. And maybe they could tell because when my grandmother bent over as if to kiss me, I stiffened. I didn't mean to. It just happened. I think my mother knew how I felt because she told them we'd better see about the luggage. When we got home, my father met us at our front door and carried in the suitcases. They had 2 of them, both brown and both new. Hello, Herb, my grandmother said. Hello, Mrs. Hutchins, my father answered. I thought how funny it was for my father to call her Mrs. My grandfather shook hands with my father. You're looking well, Herb, he said. My father pressed his lips together, but finally managed to say, Thank you. I thought, geez, this is harder on my father than it is on me. My mother and I showed my grandparents to their room. Then my mother went down to see about dinner. I said, if there's anything you need, just ask me. Thank you, Margaret Ann, my grandmother said. She had a funny way of scrunching up her mouth. You don't have to call me Margaret Ann, I said. Nobody does. Just Margaret's fine. My mother really made a fancy dinner. The kind she had when she's entertaining friends and I'm sent to bed early. We had flowers on the table and a hired lady to wash the dishes. My mother changed into a new dress and her hair looked really nice too. She didn't look like her parents at all. My grandmother changed her dress too, but she still had that cross on around her neck. At dinner, we all tried hard to have a conversation. My mother and my grandmother talked about old friends from Ohio and who was doing what these days. My grandfather said mostly, please pass the butter, please pass the salt. Naturally, I used my best possible manners. In the middle of the roast beef course, my grandfather knocked over his water glass and my grandmother gave him a sharp look. But my mother said water couldn't possibly hurt anything. The lady from the kitchen wiped it out. During dessert, my mother explained to my grandparents that she had just ordered all new living room furniture and she was sorry that they wouldn't be able to see it. I knew she hadn't ordered anything yet, but I didn't tell. Move my candles for proper lighting. Where are my grips when I need them? After dinner, we sat around in the den and my grandfather asked my father such questions as, are you still in the insurance business? Yes. Do you invest in the stock market? Occasionally. It's a pretty nice house you got. Hey, Brittany, good to see you, honey. Pretty nice house. Thank you. We think so too. While my grandmother talked to my mother about, we were in California over Thanksgiving. Oh? Yes, your brother has a wonderful wife. I'm glad. If only they were blessed with a child. You know, they're thinking of adopting. Well, I hope they do. Everyone should have a child to love. Yes, I know. I've always wanted dozens of grandchildren, but Margaret's all I've got. Fucking bitch. Then my mother excused herself to pay the lady in the kitchen who signaled that her taxi was waiting out front. So my grandmother turned to me. Do you like school? She asked. Most of the time. Do you get good marks? Pretty good, yeah, I said. And how do you like Sunday school? My mother came back into the den then and sat down next to me. I don't go to Sunday school, I said. You don't? No. Father, that's what grandmother called grandfather. He called her mother. What is it, Mother? Grandfather said. Margaret doesn't go to Sunday school, she said. She shook her head and played with her cross. Look, my mother said, trying to smile, you know we don't practice any religion. Here it comes, I thought. I wanted to leave the room, but felt like I was glued to my seat. We hoped by now that you'd changed your minds about religion, grandfather said. Especially for Margaret's sake, grandmother said. A person's got to have religion. Let's not get into a philosophical discussion, my father said, annoyed. He sent my mother a warning look across the room. Grandfather laughed. I'm not being a philosopher, Herb. Look, my mother explained, we're letting Margaret choose her own religion when she's grown. If she wants to, my father said defiantly. Nonsense, grandmother said. A person doesn't choose religion. A person's born to it, grandfather boomed. Grandmother smiled at last and gave a small laugh. So Margaret's a Christian, she announced, like we all should have known. Please, my mother said, Margaret could just as easily be Jewish. Don't you see, if you keep this up, you're going to spoil everything. I don't mean to upset you, dear, grandmother told my mother, but a child is always the religion of the mother. And you, Barbara, were born Christian. You were baptized. It's that simple. Margaret is nothing, my father stormed, and I'll thank you for ending this discussion right now. I didn't want to listen anymore. How could they talk that way in front of me? Didn't they know I was a real person with real feelings of my own? Margaret, grandmother said, touching my sleeve, it's not too late for you, dear. You're still God's child. Maybe while I'm visiting, I could take you to church and talk to the minister. He might be able to straighten things out. Stop it, I hollered, jumping up. All of you, just stop it. I can't stand another minute of listening to you. Who needs religion? Who? Not me. I don't even need it. I don't even need God. I ran out of the den and up to my room. I heard my mother say, why did you have to start? Now you've ruined everything. I was never going to talk to God again. What did he want from me anyway? I was through with him and his religions, and I was never going to set foot in the Y or the Jewish Community Center. Never. Chapter 22. Nail biter. The next morning, I stayed in my room. I wouldn't even go down for breakfast. I caught myself starting to say, are you there, God? But then I remembered that I wasn't talking to him anymore. I wondered if he would strike me down. Well, if he wanted to, that was his business. By afternoon, I couldn't stand being in the house, so I asked my mother to drive me downtown to meet Janie for a movie. My mother agreed that I needed to get away for a few hours. Janie and I met at the drugstore on the corner across the street from the movie theater. We were 20 minutes early, so we went into the drugstore to look around. Mostly, we like to inspect the sanitary napkin display. After a few minutes of looking, I whispered to Janie, let's buy a box. It was something I'd thought about for a while, but wasn't ever brave enough to do. Today, I was feeling brave. I thought, so what if God's mad at me? Who cares? I even tested him by crossing the street in the middle and against the light. Nothing happened. Buy it for what? Janie asked. Just in case, I told her. You mean to keep it home? Sure, why not? I don't know. My mother might not like it, Janie said. So don't tell her. But what if she sees it? It'll be in a bag. You can say it's school supplies. Do you have any money? Yes. Okay, now what kind should we buy? I asked. Well, how about teenage softies? Janie said. That's the kind that Gretchen uses. Okay. I took a box of teenage softies off the shelf. Well, go ahead, I said to Janie. Take yours. Okay. Janie took a box too. I also grabbed a purple pocket comb to make it look like we were really shopping. We walked to the checkout counter with our stuff and walked away just as fast when we saw that there was a boy behind the cash register. I can't go through with it, Janie whispered. She put her box back on the shelf. I'm scared. Don't be a dope. What's to be? I was interrupted by a sales lady in a blue doctor's coat. Can I help you, girls? She asked. Janie shook her head, but I said, we'd like these, please. I took Janie's box back off the shelf and showed the sales lady what we'd selected. Fine, girls. Take them up to the cash register and Max will wrap them for you. Janie didn't move. She looked like she was cemented to the floor. She had this dumb expression on her face, between crying and smiling. So I grabbed her box and headed for Max in the cash register. Plopped everything down in front of him and just stood there, not looking at his face and not saying anything either. He added it all up, and I motioned to Janie to give me her money. Then I said, 2 bags, please. Max took my money, gave me some change, which I didn't bother to count, and presented me with 2 brown bags. And that's all there was to it. You'd think he'd sold that kind of stuff every day of the week. When I got home from the movies, my mother asked, what's the package? I said, school supplies. I went to my room with my purchases. I sat down on my bed, staring at the box of teenage softies. I hoped God was watching. Let him see I could get along just fine without him. I opened the box and took out 1 pad. I held it for a long time. Finally, I got up and went to my closet. It was dark in there, especially with the door closed. I wished I had a huge walk-in closet with a light and a lock, but I managed anyway. I stuck the pad between my legs, then pulled up my underpants. I wanted to find out how it would feel. Now I knew. I liked it. I thought about sleeping with my pet that night, but I decided against it. If there was a fire, my secret might be discovered. So I took it out, put it back in its box, and hid it in my bottom desk drawer. My mother never checks there because the mess makes her positively sick. The next morning, my grandparents announced that they were moving on to New York. "You told me a week," my mother said. "You said you were coming for a week." "We did say that," my grandfather told her. "But we've decided to spend the rest of the week in New York at a hotel." "I see," my mother said. My father hid behind his newspaper, but I saw the big smile. All I could think of was that they ruined my trip to Florida, and now they weren't even staying. It wasn't fair. It was really a cheat. When my mother got back from driving them to the bus, my father said, "How much do you want to bet it was a trip to New York the whole time? They just stopped in to see you because it was convenient." "I don't believe that," my mother said. "Well, I believe it," my dad said. "They ruined my vacation," I said. Nobody answered me. Chapter 23. That night, the doorbell rang at 8. Hang on. I hate these metal straws. I feel like it's like a lot of work. I don't know why. Like, I don't want to put my teeth on it because it's like putting, like dragging a fork through your teeth. It's the same kind of feeling to me. I need like a plastic nubbin. Anywho. That night, the doorbell rang at 8. We were in the den. I said I'd see who was there. I opened the front door. "Grandma!" I screamed. I threw my arms around her. "What are you doing home?" "If Muhammad doesn't come to the mountain comes to Muhammad." I love Sylvia. She rocks. I laughed, knowing that I was Muhammad and that Grandma was the mountain. There was a man standing next to her. Grandma turned to him. "Morris," she said, "this is my Margaret." Then Grandma closed the door and told me, "Margaret, darling, this is Mr. Morris Binneman." "Rhymes with cinnamon," he said to me. I smiled. Grandma looked marvelous, very tan and pale blonde. Mr. Binneman had a lot of silver hair, a mustache to match, and black-rimmed eyeglasses. He was tan, too, and he held my grandma's arm. "Where are they?" Grandma said. "Oh, Mom and Dad are in the den." "With your other grandparents?" "No, they're gone." "Gone?" Grandma cried. "But I thought they were staying for a week." "Yeah, we thought so too," I said. "But Morris and I came especially to see them." "You did?" I said. "How come?" Grandma and Mr. Binneman gave each other a secret look. "Well, we thought you might need our support." "Oh, Grandma, I can manage just fine on my own." "I know you can. You're my Margaret, aren't you? Tell me, did they try anything?" "Like what?" "You know," Grandma said. "Church business." "Well, kinda," I answered. "I knew it," Grandma said. "Didn't I tell you?" she asked Mr. Binneman. Mr. Binneman shook his head. "You had them pegged right all the time, Sylvia," he said. "Just remember, Margaret, no matter what they said, you're a Jewish girl." "No, I'm not," I argued. "I'm nothing, and you know it. I don't even believe in God." "Margaret," Grandma said, "don't ever talk like that about God." "Why not?" I asked. "It's true." I wanted to ask God, did he hear that? But I wasn't speaking to him, and I guess he knew it. By that time, my mother and father were in the living room, and Grandma was making the introductions. My parents gave Mr. Binneman the once-over, and he was pretty busy sizing them up, too. "Hey, Kim. Hey, Chad. Good to see you guys." Then my mother made coffee and served warm Danish. She offered me some milk and ginger snaps, but I wasn't hungry. I wanted to get out of there, so I yawned very loud without covering my mouth. "Margaret, dear, if you're so tired, why don't you go up to bed?" Grandma said. "I think I will. Good night, everybody." Sometimes Grandma's almost as bad as everybody else. As long as she loves me and I love her, what difference does religion make anyway? Chapter 24. Mr. Benedict announced that our individual reports on our year-long project would be due next Friday. They wouldn't be graded, so we were to be completely honest and not worry about pleasing him. He hoped we had each learned something of value. On Thursday night, I wrote a letter. May 25th. Dear Mr. Benedict, I have conducted a year-long experiment in religion. I have not come to any conclusions about what religion I want to be when I grow up, if I want to be any special religion at all. I have read 3 books on this subject. They are Modern Judaism, A History of Christianity, and Catholicism, Past and Present. I went to church services of the First Presbyterian Church of Farbrook. I went to the United Methodist Church of Farbrook on Christmas Eve. I attended Temple Israel of New York City on Rosh Hashanah, which is a Jewish holiday. I went to confession at St. Bartholomew Church, but I had to leave the confessional because, well, I didn't know what to say. I've not tried being a Buddhist or a Muslim because I just don't know any people of these religions. I've not really enjoyed my religious experiments very much, and I don't think I'll make up my mind one way or the other for a long time. I don't think a person can decide to be a certain religion just like that. It's like having to choose your own name. You think about it a lot, a long time, and then you keep changing your mind. If I should ever have children, I will tell them what religion they are, so they can start learning about it at an early age. 12 is very late to learn. Sincerely, Margaret and Simon. On Friday, everybody handed in a thick booklet with a decorated cover. All I had was a letter. I couldn't put that in with the pile of booklets. I was too embarrassed. It looked like I hadn't done any work at all. When the bell rang, I sat at my desk while everyone else filed out of the room. Hey, Rod, nice to see you, darling. When Mr. Benedict looked up, he said, Yes, Margaret? I walked to his desk with my letter. I didn't hand in a booklet, I said. Oh? I wrote you a letter instead. I handed it to him, then stood there while he read it. Hi, Elia. I really tried, Mr. Benedict. I'm sorry. I wanted to do better. I knew I was going to cry. I couldn't say anything else, so I ran out of the classroom. I got to the girls' room before the tears came. I could still hear Mr. Benedict calling, Margaret! Margaret! I didn't pay attention. I splashed cold water on my face. Then I walked home slowly by myself. What was wrong with me anyway? When I was 11, I hardly ever cried. Now anything and everything could start me bawling. I wanted to talk it over with God, but, well, I wasn't about to let him know that, even though I missed him. She's getting overly emotional. Interesting turn of events. Chapter 25. On June 17th, the PTA gave us a farewell party in the gym, and none of the 6th grade girls wore socks. I wore my first pair of sheer stockings and got my first run in them about an hour later. I remember always getting runs in, and thank God we don't wear pantyhose anymore, Christ. All I could think of was I'd be in 7th grade in September, and I was growing up. My mind knew it, even if my body didn't. The party in the gym was a lot like the Thanksgiving square dance. Mrs. Wheeler and Mrs. Fishbein were chaperones, but this time they were dressed in regular clothes. Our class presented Mr. Benedict with a pair of silver cufflinks that Gretchen's mother had gotten wholesale. Hey, Cameron. Good to see you, honey. He seemed very pleased because he cleared his throat a lot and sounded like he didn't know what to say except thank you. And that although we hadn't started out to be the greatest 6th grade in the world, we'd come a long way. And thanks to us, next year, he'd be an experienced teacher. Very experienced. And we all laughed, and some of the girls cried, but I didn't. Nancy, Gretchen, Janie, and I had lunch downtown by ourselves and talked about how it would feel to go to junior high. Janie was so afraid she wouldn't be able to find her way around and she'd get lost. Gretchen said probably the teachers would all be mean and Nancy said, suppose we weren't in any classes together. And then we all went home and cried. Later that day, my mother started packing my camp trunk. I watched her put the stacks of shorts and polos into it. Then I heard the lawnmower. Moose was back. First, I got excited about seeing him, but then I got mad, thinking about Laura and those stories he helped spread around. I ran downstairs and outside and yelled, "Hey, Moose!" He didn't hear me because the lawnmower made too much noise. So I ran over to where he was cutting and I stood right in his way so he'd have to notice me, and I shouted again, "Hey, Moose!" He shut off the lawnmower. "You're in my way," he said. "I want to tell you something." "Go ahead." I put my hands on my hips. "You know what, Moose? You're a liar. I don't believe you ever took Laura Danker behind the A&P. "Who said I did?" "What do you mean, who said it?" "Well, who?" "Nancy told me that Evan told her that you and Evan..." I stopped. I sounded like an idiot. Moose shook his head at me. "Sorry. You always believe everything you hear about other people?" he asked. I didn't know what to say. Moose kept talking. "Well, next time, don't believe it until you see it. Now, if you move out of my way, I've got things to do." I didn't move. "You know what, Moose?" I asked. "What now?" "I'm sorry I told you you were a liar." "You know what, Margaret?" Moose asked me. "No, what?" "You're still in my way." I jumped away and Moose turned the mower on again. I heard him singing his favorite song about the Erie Canal. Was that Leah? "My niece would love this. Gonna have to get her to tune in." Oh, totally, babe. All the videos are there in order. If she's interested, she can watch right from the beginning through the whole book. I also have it posted on my YouTube channel, which I can tell you guys. It's Andrea. That's how you can find it. I went back into the house. I had to go to the bathroom. I was thinking about Moose and about how I liked to stand close to him. I was thinking that I was glad he wasn't a liar. And I was happy that he cut our grass. Then I looked down at my underpants and I couldn't believe it. There was blood in them. Not a lot, but enough. I really hollered, "Mom! Hey, Mom! Come quick!" When my mother got to the bathroom, she said, "What is it? What's the matter?" "I got it," I told her. "Got what?" I started to laugh and cry at the same time. "My period. I've got my period." My nose started running and I reached for a tissue. "Are you sure, Margaret?" my mother asked. Look at this." "Behold," I said, showing her my underpants. "My God, you've really got it, my little girl." Then her eyes filled up and she started sniffling. Oh, that made me teary a little bit. "Wait a minute. I've got the equipment in the other room. I was just going to put it in your camp trunk, just in case." "You were?" "Yes, just in case." She left the bathroom. When she came back, I asked her, why am I getting teary-cut? It must be that time of the month for me. Sorry. I think it's the mom and daughter thing, because it's kind of like, my mom died when I was 22, so it's kind of like the last, I don't know, womanly discussion I ever had with my mom, because we never had the sex talk. It was just that, and then there was a book, the What's Happening to My Body book for girls, left on my bed. And they tell you to teach that in school, right? I'm like, yeah. She's like, good. Anyway, so yeah, I just kind of brought a tear because it's, you know, kind of that. It's a mommy daughter thing. You were? Yes, just in case. She left the bathroom. When she came back, I asked her, is it that private lady stuff? No, I got you teenage softies. Good, I said. Now look, Margaret, here's how you do it. The pad fits inside your panties and... Mom, I said, I've been practicing my room for like 2 months. Then my mother and I laughed together and she said, in that case, I guess I'll wait in the other room. I locked the bathroom door and peeled the paper off the bottom of the pad. I pressed the sticky strip against my underpants. Then I got dressed and looked at myself in the mirror. Would anyone know my secret? Would it show? Would Moose, for instance, know if I went back outside to talk to him? Would my father know it right away when he came home from dinner? For dinner? I had to call Nancy and Gretchen and Janie right away. Poor Janie. She'd be the last of the PTSs to get it, and I'd be so sure that it would be me. How about that? Now I am growing for sure. Now I'm almost a woman. Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. I know you're there, God. I know you wouldn't have missed this for anything. Thank you, God. Thanks an awful lot. The end. I always cry at the end of the book. That's just how I roll. I mean, it literally doesn't even have to be sad. That's the end. Thank you all so much for joining me. I don't really have, I think what I love about this book, actually, now having read it as an adult, I think what I just think is so neat is, I think we appreciate different elements now as an adult, right? I know, Sky, it sucks that it's over. You know what I wish? I kind of wish that Judy had written, like, Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret, in her 20s. That would be a scream. I would freaking love to read that. And, you know, maybe I'll write that book because God knows I've got stories I can share. But I do like reading this book from with the adult perspective. You know what I mean? You see it from the parents' point of view, for instance. And, you know, we're all adults and in marriages and out of marriages and have fallen in or out of love with our parents and we had to make really, really hard decisions through our lives to support our spouses and our partners, our family, our choices. And sometimes it just doesn't work out the way you want. Like, you kind of expected the grandparents to embrace them, but it didn't happen, you know, and it hurts like hell when it happens. But then I always say to myself, you know, just because it didn't work out the way you wanted it to, doesn't mean it didn't work out the way it was supposed to. Do you know what I mean? So, and I think that's one of those cases where, you know, it wouldn't have been a good influence on Margaret, quite frankly. And Sylvia is the bee's fucking knees. I just love that woman. She reminds me of every aunt and uncle that I have, that I'm so blessed to have in my life. The funny, charismatic, you know, opinionated, but loving and supportive aunts and uncles and family, extended family, who are just always there for you, no matter what, you know, ready to take the shit off the back. So, yeah, and Margaret, I mean, what can you say? She's representing every typical girl who went through the same thing growing up. And, you know, whether we're an adult now looking back, like that friend who reached out to me, who was asking for my perspective as to why he was treated differently when we were in elementary school. Excuse me a sec. And I mean, it touched me so deeply because you know, that's the thing. When you're a kid and you have these impressions that you get about other people and about your position and your status in life and with your friends and your family and everybody, I find it so interesting how even despite the fact that you grow up, you actually don't, your perspective doesn't. It really kind of doesn't. You kind of get stuck there if you don't revisit it and try to kind of rethink it. And I was so grateful that this person reached out, so I was able to kind of give some sort of perspective on that and make it hopefully, well, and I think it did make sense. And in fact, as a side note, we've kept in touch. Because I said, hey, let's keep in touch. You know what I mean? And, you know, we found we both share an intense love and admiration for the Beatles music. That's just why I'm posting so much of it on a daily these days. And you know what? He's got a killer sense of humor, like dry, like mine. And so, yeah, like I'm just so pleased because now I've got a new friend. And so, you know, sometimes it sucks and sometimes it's not easy. And especially when we were growing up, a lot of the times it's not. But it works out the way it's supposed to. Everything always does. And that's kind of the last note I would have to say. Just most people know that, but there's a little gentle reminder. I know the Beatles, right, babe? Woohoo! I love them. They're just so good. Like every little song I post every night. How many of those off the shoulder numbers do you have? These are my jams. I mean, I wear them. I only wear them for like an hour and a half. And I'm in bed and I'm not a jammy wearer in bed, but yeah, but thanks. I know I want to get like 100 of them made. in every possible color. And in fact, I probably will. This, in fact, was made by a local seamstress. And if you're interested, Cheryl, I'll post a link because she's on my Facebook. I'll post the link. She's in West Van, I think. She's got a boutique there. This is all handmade stuff for buxom women like me and you. So anyway, yeah, I'll definitely post that. And just a last note, if you want to continue, because I will start another book. If you have, I would like suggestions as to what you want to hear. I kind of like the keeping it light. I like, you know, again, I've talked about the Kill a Mockingbird a lot. There's so many wonderful novels out there that I could read that are enlightening and challenging in our beliefs and stuff like that. But I really kind of like keeping this light. I think it's a nice escape from the day-to-day drudgery and miseries and all that stuff. I don't want to add to that. I really like having the laugh that we have. So I want to keep it light. Children's books, stories, tales like this. I even thought Bridget Jones' Diary would be good. Eat, Pray, Love's pretty good. That's pretty funny too. But there's a couple of suggestions that a friend of mine made. So on Thursday, I will be here online, and what I'll do is I'll present some options. Come online, have a chat with me, and you know, maybe I'll do a little poll thing. You can vote on what you want, and then I'll go get the book so I can start it next Monday. Okay, that's my plan. If you have any other suggestions, let me know. So with that, I will wrap it up. It is now 8 o'clock on the button. Thank you so much. One final thank you for joining me. It just brings joy to my day every time I see you guys join me and you know, laugh with me and message me later on at night to tell me that you're settling into bed to hear it. I absolutely love it. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining me for this tale. Have a wonderful night. I love you. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I will talk to you. I love you too, cousin. All my best to Australia and Scotland and Arizona and Nova Scotia and everywhere. All my friends and family around the world. I love you guys. And I'll see you on Thursday.